The galaxy had always been a dangerous place, but no one expected the Vorik to come. These towering insect-like creatures were known for their strength and hunger for conquest. For centuries, they traveled from planet to planet, destroying everything in their path. Their ships were massive, their weapons unmatched, and their warriors fearless. No species had ever stood against them and won. That was until they reached Earth. It all started with a strange light in the sky. People stopped what they were doing to look up, pointing at the enormous shadow that blocked out the sun. The Vorik fleet descended into Earth's orbit like a swarm of locusts. Panic spread quickly as news reports showed cities being targeted by alien scout ships. Governments tried to calm the public, but everyone knew this wasn't just another crisis. It was the end of the world as they knew it. In New Chicago, Daniel Carter sat on his apartment balcony, watching the chaos unfold on the streets below. Cars honked endlessly as people rushed to leave the city. Stores were already empty, their shelves picked clean by those trying to prepare for the worst. Daniel sighed and rubbed his temples. He had once been a military strategist, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Now, he worked as a civilian contractor, designing security systems for buildings. His wife, Laura, was busy at the hospital, helping organize emergency care for anyone who might need it. Their teenage son, Ethan, was glued to the TV, flipping between channels showing footage of the invasion. "This is crazy," Ethan muttered, shaking his head. "Do you think we'll have to fight them?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "I don't know, kid, but if we do, we'll find a way." Ethan didn't seem convinced. "They're huge, and they've got those weird claws and glowing weapons. How are we supposed to beat something like that?" Before Daniel could respond, the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. Both father and son ran to the window, scanning the horizon. Thick black smoke rose from the industrial district. The Vorik had landed. Across town, Captain Rachel Monroe led a small team of soldiers toward the crash site. Her heart pounded as she gripped her rifle tightly. This was her first encounter with the aliens, and she wasn't sure what to expect. When they arrived, the scene was worse than she imagined. The Vorik moved with terrifying speed, their armored bodies deflecting bullets like they were nothing. One of her men screamed as a claw sliced through his armor, leaving him bleeding on the ground. Rachel shouted orders, trying to keep her team alive, but it was no use. The aliens were too strong. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Rachel noticed something strange. One of the Vorik paused mid-attack, tilting its head as if confused. It scanned the area, then turned away without finishing off the remaining soldiers. Rachel didn't understand why, but she took advantage of the moment to retreat. As she dragged her injured comrade to safety, she realized something important. These creatures weren't invincible. There had to be a weakness. Back in Washington, D.C., President Jameson called an emergency meeting with top advisors. Dr. Emily Grant, a scientist specializing in alien biology, presented her theory. "These aren't mindless monsters," she explained. "They're hunters. They thrive on challenge and dominance. If we can make ourselves harder to catch, maybe we can turn their instincts against them." Her words gave everyone some hope, but time was running out. The Vorik were already abducting humans, taking them back to their ships for what many feared would be deadly hunts. Daniel listened to the news updates late into the night, wondering how ordinary people could possibly stand against such a powerful enemy. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had one thing the Vorik didn't: each other. As the days passed, stories began to circulate about brave acts of resistance. Some came from soldiers like Rachel Monroe, while others were tales of ordinary citizens banding together to protect their neighborhoods. Slowly but surely, the seeds of rebellion began to grow. And though the outcome was far from certain, one thing was clear: the Vorik had finally met their match. The first real battle between humans and the Vorik took place in the Arizona desert. A small group of soldiers, led by Captain Rachel Monroe, had been sent to investigate reports of alien activity near an abandoned mining town. What they found was more than they bargained for: Dozens of Vorik warriors, their bodies covered in shimmering black armor, moved with terrifying speed across the cracked earth. They carried weapons that glowed with energy, firing beams of light that cut through metal and stone like paper. Rachel's team tried to hold their ground, but it was clear from the start that they were outmatched. The Vorik advanced without hesitation, their claws slicing through anything in their path. One soldier after another fell, either wounded or killed. Rachel shouted orders, trying to keep her squad organized, but fear was spreading faster than she could control it. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, she spotted something odd. One of the Vorik hesitated during the attack, tilting its head as if confused. It scanned the area, then turned away, ignoring the remaining soldiers entirely. Rachel didn't have time to think about why. She grabbed one of her injured teammates and dragged him behind a pile of rocks, using the cover to hide from the advancing aliens. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched them move past her position, searching for other targets. When the coast was clear, she signaled for her team to retreat. They limped back to their vehicles, battered but alive. Rachel couldn't explain what had happened, but she knew one thing. The Vorik weren't perfect. There was something about them that humanity could exploit. Back in Washington, D.C., President Jameson called another emergency meeting. This time, Dr. Emily Grant stood at the front of the room, holding up a holographic image of a Vorik warrior. "These creatures are hunters," she explained. "They don't just attack randomly. They seek out challenges. If we can make ourselves harder to catch, we might be able to confuse them." Her words sparked a debate among the advisors. Some argued that humanity should focus on building stronger weapons, while others believed retreating underground was the only option. In the end, General Harold Briggs suggested a compromise. "We'll use guerrilla tactics," he said. "Hit-and-run attacks. Ambushes, traps, anything to slow them down and buy us time." Rachel was called into the meeting shortly after. Though she wasn't high-ranking, her experience in Arizona made her a valuable asset. She listened carefully as the general outlined his plan. Guerrilla warfare wasn't new to her. She'd studied it in training, but never thought she'd actually have to use it. Still, she agreed to help. The military needed someone who had seen the Vorik up close, and Rachel was willing to step up. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter spent his days helping organize safe zones for civilians. His wife, Laura, worked long hours at the hospital, treating the injured and comforting the scared. Their teenage son, Ethan, stayed busy tinkering with old electronics, trying to build gadgets that might help the resistance. Despite the chaos around them, the family found moments of peace. One evening, as they sat together eating canned soup, Ethan asked, "Do you think we'll win?" Daniel looked at his son and smiled weakly. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we got no choice but to try." Elsewhere, a young woman named Mia Torres was making waves in the underground hacker community. She had always been good with computers, but now she used her skills to infiltrate Vorik communication networks. Sitting in a dimly lit basement with a group of other tech-savvy teens, Mia pored over lines of alien code, looking for patterns. It wasn't easy. The Vorik language was unlike anything she'd ever seen, but she refused to give up. After days of non-stop work, she finally cracked part of their system. What she discovered was alarming. The Vorik were planning to abduct thousands of humans and take them to their ships for hunting games. Mia shared the information with anyone who would listen. Resistance groups sprang up across the globe, using her intel to prepare ambushes and sabotage Vorik operations. For the first time since the invasion began, people started to believe they might actually stand a chance. The Vorik were strong, but humanity had something they didn't: creativity, determination, and the will to survive. Bit by bit, the tide was beginning to turn. As the days passed, humanity's fight against the Vorik grew more desperate. The aliens had begun abducting humans in large numbers, taking them to their ships for what many feared were deadly hunting games. Entire neighborhoods disappeared overnight, leaving behind only empty streets and abandoned homes. The resistance needed a plan, and they needed it fast. General Harold Briggs called a meeting at a secret military base hidden deep in the mountains. Among those invited were Daniel Carter, whose knowledge of strategy made him invaluable, and Captain Rachel Monroe, who had first-hand experience fighting the Vorik. Also present was Dr. Emily Grant, the scientist who had been studying the aliens' behavior, and Nathan Cole, a quiet but brilliant engineer known for his work on advanced technology. "We can't keep running," General Briggs said, pacing back and forth in front of the group. "We need weapons that can match theirs, and we need ways to outsmart them." Dr. Grant nodded. "The Vorik rely heavily on their senses, especially scent. If we can disrupt that, we might be able to confuse them." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "What if we create decoys? Something that smells like humans but isn't real. We could lure them into traps." Rachel liked the idea. It could work. In Arizona, one of the Vorik hesitated during the attack. Maybe it got confused by something in the environment. With this new direction, the team got to work. Nathan spent hours in the lab, tinkering with scraps of alien technology scavenged from downed drones. He combined human engineering with Vorik components, creating crude but effective energy weapons. These guns fired bursts of light that could pierce the aliens' armor, giving soldiers a fighting chance. Meanwhile, Mia Torres and her group of young hackers continued to dig deeper into the Vorik communication network. They discovered patterns in how the aliens organized their hunts, including the locations where abductions were most likely to occur. This information allowed resistance fighters to set up ambushes, striking quickly and disappearing before the Vorik could retaliate. Laura Carter worked tirelessly alongside other volunteers to prepare safe zones for civilians. These hidden shelters were stocked with food, water, and medical supplies, offering refuge to those fleeing the chaos. Though the work was exhausting, Laura found strength in the small acts of kindness she witnessed every day. Strangers shared what little they had, and children played together despite the fear hanging over their heads. Ethan, inspired by his parents' efforts, joined Mia's hacking group. At first, he felt out of place among the older teens, but his quick thinking earned their respect. One night, while analyzing Vorik data, Ethan noticed something unusual, a repeating sequence in their transmissions. It looked like coordinates. When Maya cross-referenced the numbers, they realized it was the location of a massive Vorik base hidden in the Arctic. "This could be our chance," Maya said, excitement in her voice. "If we hit them there, we might be able to cripple their operations." Word of the discovery reached General Briggs, who immediately began planning an assault. A team of soldiers, armed with Nathan's new weapons, would infiltrate the base and gather intelligence. Rachel volunteered to lead the mission, knowing how dangerous it would be. Before leaving, she visited Daniel to ask for advice. "You've faced them before," she said. "What should I expect?" Daniel thought for a moment. "They're fast and strong, but they're not unbeatable. Use the environment to your advantage. Stay unpredictable." Rachel took his words to heart. As she prepared for the mission, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a plan that might actually work. The Vorik had underestimated Earth's defenders, and now they were about to pay the price. Across the globe, people held their breath, waiting to see if the Resistance's gamble would succeed. The battle ahead would be fierce, but one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The Arctic was cold and unforgiving, a place where even the strongest humans struggled to survive. But for Rachel Monroe and her team, it wasn't just the freezing temperatures they had to worry about. Hidden deep within the icy landscape was a Vorik base, a fortress filled with alien hunters who saw humans as nothing more than prey. The mission was risky, but it was also their best chance to strike back against the invaders. Rachel led a small group of soldiers, each armed with Nathan's energy weapons and equipped with thermal gear to withstand the harsh environment. They moved silently across the snow, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The plan was simple: infiltrate the base, gather intelligence, and sabotage whatever they could. But everyone knew that things rarely went according to plan when facing the Vorik. As they approached the base, Rachel signaled for the team to stop. She crouched behind a ridge, scanning the area through binoculars. The Vorik had set up patrols around the perimeter, their glowing weapons casting eerie shadows on the ice. Rachel turned to her second-in-command, a young soldier named Mark, and whispered, "We'll need a distraction." Mark nodded and motioned for two others to follow him. They crept away from the group, carrying small explosives designed to create noise without causing too much damage. A few minutes later, a loud boom echoed through the frozen wasteland. The Vorik patrols immediately shifted their attention toward the sound, leaving the main entrance unguarded. Rachel seized the opportunity. She gestured for her team to move forward, and they slipped inside the base unnoticed. The interior was a maze of metal corridors, dimly lit by pulsing blue lights. Strange symbols covered the walls, and the air smelled faintly of chemicals. Rachel kept her weapon ready, knowing they could run into enemies at any moment. They soon found what they were looking for: a large room filled with glowing screens and strange devices. Dr. Emily Grant had explained that these were likely communication hubs used by the Vorik to coordinate their hunts. Rachel handed out tools to her team, instructing them to plant charges that would disable the equipment. As they worked, she noticed something unusual: jars lining one wall, each containing what looked like human remains. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus. They didn't have time to dwell on the horrors the Vorik had committed. Just as the last charge was set, alarms blared throughout the base. The team froze, exchanging worried glances. Someone, or something, had discovered them. "Move," Rachel shouted, leading the way back toward the exit. The corridors were no longer empty. Vorik warriors emerged from every direction, their claws gleaming under the flickering lights. The team fired their energy weapons, beams of light cutting through the aliens' armor. But for every Vorik they took down, two more seemed to appear. Rachel realized they couldn't fight their way out. Thinking quickly, she remembered Daniel's advice: use the environment. She spotted a control panel near the ceiling and fired at it. Sparks flew as the panel exploded, causing part of the ceiling to collapse. The falling debris created a barrier between the team and the Vorik, giving them a chance to escape. They burst out into the freezing air, running as fast as their legs would carry them. Behind them, the base erupted in flames as the charges detonated, destroying the communication hub and sending shockwaves through the structure. The team didn't stop until they reached their extraction point, where a helicopter waited to take them home. Back at the Resistance headquarters, news of the successful mission spread quickly. The sabotage had disrupted the Vorik's operations, forcing them to slow their hunting campaigns. For the first time in weeks, people allowed themselves to feel a glimmer of hope. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had proven it could fight back. Rachel stood outside the command center, staring at the horizon. She thought about the jars in the Vorik base and clenched her fists. The aliens had underestimated Earth's defenders, and now they were paying the price. But Rachel knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more challenges ahead. Still, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was learning how to win. The sabotage at the Vorik base in the Arctic sent shockwaves through their operations. For days, their hunting campaign slowed as they scrambled to repair their damaged communication systems. But Zorith, the leader of the Vorik, was not one to tolerate failure. Enraged by the attack, he ordered his forces to intensify their efforts, vowing to crush humanity once and for all. In response, General Briggs called an emergency meeting with the Resistance leaders. "We hit them hard in the Arctic," he said, pacing back and forth. "But they're regrouping. If we don't act now, they'll retaliate with everything they've got." Dr. Emily Grant spoke up. "Their ships are still vulnerable. If we can target their mothership, the one orbiting Earth. We might be able to disable their entire fleet. Nathan Cole nodded. I've been working on modifying our fighter jets. With the energy weapons I built, we might stand a chance against their defenses. Rachel Monroe volunteered to lead the assault. Though she had barely recovered from the Arctic mission, she knew this was their best opportunity to turn the tide. Daniel Carter, who had been helping strategize from the ground, offered his input. You'll need decoys, he said. Something to distract their fighters while you make your way to the mothership. Mia Torres and her hacking team worked tirelessly to gather intel on the Vorik fleet. Using the data they had intercepted, Mia identified weak points in the mothership's shields. If you time your attack right, she told Rachel, you can slip through before they close the gap. The plan was set. A small squadron of modified fighter jets would launch from a hidden airbase, armed with Nathan's energy weapons and guided by Mia's intel. Laura Carter helped prepare medical supplies for the pilots, knowing the dangers they faced. Ethan, inspired by the bravery of the soldiers, stayed up late helping Nathan fine-tune the jet's targeting systems. On the day of the mission, Rachel stood beside her jet, taking deep breaths to steady her nerves. The other pilots exchanged nervous glances, but there was determination in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. As the engines roared to life, Rachel climbed into her cockpit and gave the signal to launch. The flight to the mothership was tense. The Earth below grew smaller as they ascended into space, the vastness of the galaxy stretching out around them. When they reached the Vorik fleet, swarms of alien fighters surged toward them, weapons blazing. The decoy drones deployed just in time, drawing the enemy fire away from the squadron. Rachel led her team through the chaos, weaving between explosions and bursts of energy. Her heart raced as she approached the mothership, its massive form looming ahead like a dark cloud. The shields flickered open briefly, and Rachel seized the moment, guiding her jet inside. The interior of the mothership was unlike anything she had ever seen. Strange machinery hummed with alien energy, and glowing conduits lined the walls. Rachel spotted the control room, a large chamber filled with Vorik warriors and towering screens displaying maps of Earth. This was it. If they could destroy the command center, the entire fleet would fall into disarray. We only have one shot, Rachel said over the comms. Stay focused. The team split up, each pilot targeting key systems within the ship. Rachel fired her energy weapon at the central console, causing sparks to fly and alarms to blare. Vorik warriors charged at her, but she fought back with everything she had, using her jet's agility to dodge their attacks. Just as it seemed like they might succeed, a massive figure appeared in the doorway. It was Zorath himself, his armored body gleaming under the red emergency lights. He let out a guttural roar, raising his clawed hands as if ready to tear the humans apart. Rachel's mind raced. She couldn't fight him head-on, but she didn't need to. With one final burst of courage, she aimed her weapon at the ceiling above Zorath and fired. The structure collapsed, trapping him beneath the debris. "Let's go," Rachel shouted, leading her team back to their jets. They escaped just as the mothership began to break apart, its engines erupting in flames. Back on Earth, the Resistance celebrated their victory. The Vorik fleet was crippled, and Zorath's leadership was in question. Humanity had struck a major blow, proving that even the strongest predators could be challenged. But Rachel knew the war wasn't over yet. There would be more battles to come, and more sacrifices to make. Still, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that humanity might actually win. The destruction of the Vorik mothership sent shockwaves through their empire. For the first time in centuries, the Vorik were forced to retreat. Zorath, their leader, had barely escaped the collapsing command center, but his reputation was shattered. The hunters who once followed him without question now whispered among themselves, doubting his strength and leadership. On Earth, the Resistance celebrated their hard-fought victory, but they knew the fight wasn't over yet. Rachel Monroe returned to the base as a hero, though she didn't feel like one. Her body ached from the battles, and her mind was heavy with the weight of what she had seen. Still, she couldn't afford to rest. Reports came in that smaller Vorik ships were regrouping, preparing for another attack. Humanity needed to stay one step ahead. Dr. Emily Grant called an emergency meeting with the resistance leaders. "We've weakened them," she said, "but we haven't defeated them. If we want to end this, we need to strike at their core, their belief system." "What do you mean?" Daniel Carter asked, leaning forward in his chair. "The Vorik thrive on fear and dominance," Emily explained. "They see themselves as superior because no species has ever stood up to them before. But now we've shown them we're not easy prey. If we can break their confidence completely, their entire society might collapse." Rachel nodded slowly. "You're saying we need to challenge Zoreth directly?" "Yes," Emily replied. "If you can force him into a fight and prove that humans are stronger, not just physically, but mentally, he'll lose control over his people." The idea was risky, but it made sense. Rachel volunteered to face Zoreth, knowing it would be the most dangerous mission of her life. General Briggs tried to talk her out of it, but she was determined. "This is our best chance to end this war," she said. "I won't back down." Preparations began immediately. Nathan Cole worked around the clock to upgrade Rachel's weapons, adding features that could counter Zoreth's biomechanical enhancements. Maya Torres and her team hacked into Vorik communications, pinpointing the location of Zoreth's new command post. Laura Carter helped gather supplies, while Ethan designed a protective suit for Rachel using materials scavenged from alien wreckage. When the day came, Rachel stood at the edge of a dense forest, where Zoreth's forces had set up camp. She took a deep breath, gripping her weapon tightly. "This is it," she muttered to herself. As she approached the clearing, Zoreth emerged from his ship, towering over her like a dark storm cloud. His claws gleamed in the sunlight, and his eyes burned with rage. "You dare challenge me?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. "I'm not afraid of you," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Your kind has hunted us, killed us, and treated us like animals. But we're not your prey. Prove to me you're as strong as you claim, or step aside and let your people see the truth." Zoreth hesitated, then let out a roar, charging at her with terrifying speed. Rachel dodged, firing her weapon at his legs to slow him down. The battle was fierce, each blow shaking the ground beneath them. Zoreth's strength was unmatched, but Rachel's quick thinking gave her an edge. She used smoke bombs to disorient him and traps hidden in the forest to trip him up. Finally, after what felt like hours, Rachel found her opening. She aimed her weapon at Zoreth's chest, targeting the glowing core embedded in his armor. With a single shot, she struck true, causing the core to crack and sputter. Zoreth staggered, clutching the wound as his body began to weaken. Rachel stepped closer, her weapon still trained on him. "It's over," she said. "Surrender, or I'll finish you." For a moment, Zoreth looked ready to fight on, but something in his expression changed. He lowered his claws, his pride broken. "You win," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Word of Zoreth's defeat spread quickly among the Vorik. Some warriors began questioning their loyalty to their leader, while others turned to humanity, seeking peace. The tide had turned, and for the first time, hope truly seemed within reach. The defeat of Zoreth sent ripples through the Vorik ranks. For centuries, their society had been built on fear and dominance, with Zoreth as the ultimate symbol of strength. But now, his failure had shattered that image. Many Vorik warriors began to question whether their way of life was worth continuing. Some even started looking at humanity not as prey, but as equals, or perhaps something more. Among these dissenters was Vrax, one of Zoreth's former lieutenants. Tall and imposing like all Vorik, Vrax had always followed orders without hesitation. But after witnessing Rachel Monroe's courage and skill in battle, he began to see things differently. He approached Daniel Carter and Dr. Emily Grant under the cover of darkness, seeking an alliance. "We do not wish to continue this war," Vrax said, his deep voice rumbling. Many of us believe there is another path, a future where our species can coexist. Daniel exchanged a wary glance with Emily. Trusting the Vorik wasn't easy, especially after everything they had done. But Daniel also knew that humanity couldn't win this fight alone forever. If some Vorik were willing to help, it might be their best chance to secure lasting peace. "What do you propose?" Daniel asked cautiously. Vrax explained that Zoreth's remaining loyalists were planning one final assault on Earth. Without leadership, those loyalists would fall into chaos, but defeating them would still require significant effort. Vrax offered to lead a faction of rebel Vorik warriors to fight alongside humans against their own kind. Emily spoke up. "If we work together, we can end this once and for all. But trust has to go both ways." Vrax nodded. "We understand. This is our chance to prove ourselves, to you and to our own people." With Vrax's help, the Resistance devised a plan to strike at the heart of the Loyalist forces. Using intel gathered by Maya Taurus and her hacking team, they identified key locations where the Vorik were regrouping. Nathan Cole worked tirelessly to modify weapons for both human and Vorik fighters, ensuring everyone was equipped for the battle ahead. Rachel Monroe led the combined forces into what would become the final showdown. The battlefield was a mix of urban ruins and open plains, littered with the scars of previous conflicts. Human soldiers fought side by side with rebel Vorik warriors, their movements coordinated despite their differences. It was strange to see the two species working together, but necessity had forged an uneasy bond. As the fighting raged on, Rachel found herself back-to-back with Vrax, fending off waves of loyalist attackers. "You're not so bad for a bug," she joked, firing her weapon at an approaching enemy. Vrax let out a sound that might have been laughter. "And you are far stronger than any human I have encountered." Their teamwork turned the tide of the battle. With Vrax's knowledge of Vorik tactics and Rachel's leadership, they managed to push the Loyalists back until only a small group remained. These last warriors refused to surrender, clinging to the old ways of violence and conquest. In the end, it was Ethan Carter who made the decisive move. Using a device he had built, a portable EMP generator, he disabled the Loyalists' weapons, leaving them defenseless. The remaining rebels surrounded them, offering a choice: join the rebellion or face justice for their crimes. One by one, the Loyalists dropped their weapons, their pride broken. The war was over. Back on Earth, celebrations broke out across the globe. People danced in the streets, hugged strangers, and cried tears of relief. Laura Carter treated wounded soldiers and civilians alike, her hands steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. Daniel stood beside her, watching as the sun rose over a world that finally felt safe again. But the victory came with new challenges: rebuilding cities, healing wounds, and forging trust between humans and Vorik wouldn't be easy. Still, there was hope. For the first time, the galaxy seemed less vast and lonely. Humanity had proven it could stand toe-to-toe with even the fiercest predators, and live to tell the tale. The war was over, but the work of rebuilding had just begun. Cities lay in ruins, their streets filled with rubble and broken dreams. Yet, amidst the destruction, there were signs of hope. People came together to clear debris, repair homes, and care for the injured. Neighbors who had once been strangers now shared meals and stories, united by the hardships they had endured. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger than ever. Vrax and his rebel Vorik played a crucial role in the recovery efforts. Though many humans were hesitant to trust them at first, their actions spoke louder than words. They used their strength to lift fallen buildings, their advanced technology to restore power grids, and their knowledge to help humanity understand the aliens' ways. Slowly but surely, barriers began to fall, replaced by a fragile but growing bond between the two species. Rachel Monroe became a symbol of this new era. Her bravery in battle and her willingness to challenge Zoreth inspired people on both sides. She traveled across the globe, sharing stories of cooperation and resilience. In every speech, she emphasized one simple truth: we are stronger together. Dr. Emily Grant and Nathan Cole continued studying Vorik technology, determined to ensure humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Their research led to breakthroughs in energy systems, medicine, and communication, benefiting not just Earth, but also the Vorik rebels eager to rebuild their own society. Together, they envisioned a future where both species could thrive, learning from each other's strengths. Ethan Carter, once just a teenager tinkering in his room, found himself celebrated as a hero. His EMP device had turned the tide in the final battle, proving that even the smallest contributions could make a big difference. He joined Mia Torres and her team of young hackers, working to create systems that would prevent another invasion. For the first time, Ethan felt like he truly belonged somewhere. Laura Carter returned to her work at the hospital, treating patients with the same compassion that had guided her through the worst days of the war. She often thought about how much had changed, not just in the world, but within herself. The fear and uncertainty she had felt were still there, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, she focused on healing, one person at a time. Daniel Carter spent his days helping organize communities, ensuring everyone had what they needed to start anew. He marveled at how far they had come, from running scared to standing tall against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. At night, he sat with Laura and Ethan, grateful for the family he had fought so hard to protect. As weeks turned into months, Earth began to heal. Fields once scared by alien weapons bloomed with new life. Children played in parks rebuilt by volunteers. And in the skies above, human and Vorik ships flew side by side, patrolling the stars to safeguard their shared future. Zorath's fate remained unknown. Some believed he had fallen into deep space, vowing revenge. Others thought he had perished, unable to survive without his empire. Either way, his shadow no longer loomed over them. Vrax took on a leadership role among the Vorik, advocating for peace and cooperation. Under his guidance, many of his kind began to see humans not as prey, but as partners. One evening, Rachel stood on a hill overlooking New Chicago. The city sparkled with lights, a testament to humanity's resilience. Beside her stood Vrax, his towering form silhouetted against the horizon. "Do you think we can really do this?" she asked quietly. "Build a better future, I mean." Vrax tilted his head, considering her question. "It will not be easy," he admitted. "But if we continue to trust each other and learn from our mistakes, I believe it is possible." Rachel smiled. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel at peace. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of dangers yet unseen. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven it could face any predator, even those from beyond the stars. And in doing so, they had earned not just survival, but respect. The road ahead would be long, but it was theirs to walk, together.